Awesome. Well, welcome to the 2024 Trusted CI Fellows panel. This isn't something we've been doing annually with the history of the Fellows program. The interesting thing this time, of course, is that we have a sampling of fellows from across the years. And so I'm the moderator again, Rick Wagner, with the support and help of Jim Marsteller, who does quite a bit for the program. Just as a quick outline, you'll notice that we have 11 fellows here, and technically including myself, but I'm going to let all the awesome answers and statements come from the folks that are seated in front of you. And so we're just going to do, Jim's going to do a brief summary of the Trusted CI Fellows program, because of course, as you know from this morning and other conversations, the Fellows program is evolving along with Trusted CI. And then I have a set of prepared questions to the panel that'll try and take advantage of all of this experience in different areas and different perspectives on cybersecurity in research. So Jim, with that, you can just arrow key or whatever else you need to do.
Thank you.
Rick.
Good afternoon. As Rick said, my name is Jim Marsteller. I'm with the Trusted CI program. And also, as Rick had mentioned, as Trusted CI is now maturing and looking at enhancing or revisiting some of our programs, the Fellows program is one of them. So it was first started in 2019. And it was really, the goal was to establish campus champions. So these would be people that would be advocates within their own organizations for advancing cybersecurity programs within their facilities, and also those that are knowledgeable about the resources that Trusted CI has to provide in connecting the Trusted CI with those on their campus to actually do some benefit. To date, we've had 35 fellows trained over those 5 years since it first began. Most of them, our graduates, are in higher ed or research. Obviously, the main thing here is to focus on cybersecurity training and also to promote the liaison role that they have with their own institution. And this is just a nice shot of all the different fellows we've had from 2019, 2020, through the pandemic to last year. And normally we would have announced the new program in the spring, I think, or midsummer. But as I mentioned, we're looking at redeveloping the program going forward. But still, the core is going to be empowering, members of the scientific community with basic knowledge of cybersecurity. And to establish a fellowship of fellows, which we have here today. This is the first time that we've actually had multiple fellows from different years all together. And we really want to build upon this going forward to really engage them a lot more and to have them in our community for a much longer time. Okay, so some of the things that are included in this curriculum, we call it the Virtual Institute. It happens over a period of months. We do an introduction to Trusted CI, anatomy of a cyber attack, developing cybersecurity programs. So various different things. And one of the things we're looking at is, which of these programs really added value that people were able to take and apply to their everyday work. So we're going to be looking at this and seeing, are there any adjustments that need to be made? So I also want to point out some of the alumni impact. The man who was up here before me, I think, is probably one of our star fellows, Rick Wagner, the Chief Technology Officer. He has been moderator for this panel now for how many years?
At least 3 years.
3 years. So he's come back to the summer every year, been an excellent panelist or moderator. He's also served on the program committee now for 3 years or so. So he's also delivered a lot of sessions at the summit. So really appreciate everything that you've done for the community.
Right? Very welcome.
Another one, Dr. Anshul Arege. She was a fellow in 2020, I want to say.
2019.
2019. And Anshul was actually our keynote speaker last year, talking about social engineering, and human factors at her keynote. And she's also served on the program committees. Gabriela Perez, also a former fellow, helped with our student programs in the past. So these are just a few examples of how our fellows have made an impact to the community. And we hope that that impact will even be more profound in the coming years. So speaking of the coming years, as I said, 5 years, we thought it was a good time just to take a pause and think, what could we be doing different? So one of the things that we're looking to do is to increase the number of fellows. So currently it's been 10. We're looking to double that over a period of years in the future here, adding 3 or 4 each year until we get that maximum of 20. The other thing we're looking to do too is to shift the program timeline. So often the program would start in the early winter and run through summer. We're looking to try to sync it with the summit. So we'll kick it off at the annual summit. Fellows will get to meet in person. They'll work over the year, and hopefully we can have them come back the following year summit to meet the new incoming class and share their experiences. So a little bit more of a cycle there. And it would also give them summers off. I think everyone would appreciate that. And over the next few months, we're going to be contacting the fellows alumni to ask them, what really worked? What did you find beneficial? If you had to do it all over again, what would you change? And some of the things you're looking at is the delivery of the educational material. So primarily it's been lecture. We have a guest speaker that comes in and they do a lecture. We're looking to seek more ways to make it interactive, to allow the fellows to ask questions, maybe perhaps give them an assignment up front to read, and then we have a discussion when they actually meet. So we're looking at all these different things, and we're going to be seeking the advice of our alumni to help us with that. And then we're also going to be looking at ways that we can increase their involvement. For example, past fellows acting as an advisory committee for one of our projects we have for the Framework Advisory Committee, or perhaps being a mentor in our student program or helping us figure out how can we really engage our students a lot more. So these are the things we're going to look at for trying to increase engagement. And I think with that, I'm going to hand it back to Rick. Thank you, Rick.
Really appreciate that.
Sure.
And I will say for my part, I really do enjoy this, being the moderator for the panel after my experience at being a fellow and the ongoing participation on the planning committee, because you want to find a way to contribute that suits your time, availability, and interests. And the planning committee discussions are always fruitful because it's a lot of folks who are constantly dealing with pain points. And we're trying to use that to influence the program every year. So if compliance is a topic, it's because we're dealing with that quite a bit. So, all right. So as I said, some of you might have heard this. So we've got 11 panelists here, and we want to hear your views on cybersecurity and research. And so I've got a set of questions, one of which I would like you all to answer. And as we were told, the microphones are really good. I don't see any complaints in the Zoom chat. Okay, yeah. So we'll do the 1 minute after that. If there is a question from Zoom, we'll prioritize it, but I have more to go. So aim for about a minute for each response, because we do want to cover a few of these. And all right, with that, especially this is for Mr. Basnes and Pizard. The first question is intended to be a survey based on your experiences. All right. What do you need more of to improve research cybersecurity, and a short blurb on why? You get 3 choices. It's either money, unified federal guidance, or leadership support. And this is be selfish. You're all in different roles. If you're a researcher, grant funding might be exactly what you need. If you're within a small HPC team on a campus, leadership support might be the thing that you feel is holding you back. And for those of us personally, NIH coming out with new requirements for DB-GAP, I could really wish there was unified federal guidance for a lot of this stuff. But this is you. Like, what would be the one thing that you would like to see handled? And with that, just to make him nervous, Ray, are you ready to kick this off?
Okay. I think all of the above. And that will be my point, but I think leadership support will be my, I think, top priority. In some institutions, we have different administration levels. For example, Office of Research, the academic affairs, and IT. You know, they need to work together, and there must be, a mission or a goal coming from the top to bottom, rather than the regular faculty or the staff trying to convince the IT or other people. I think leadership support would be very critical for my case.
And we'll just go right on down the line, so.
Yeah, it's hard to deconstruct leadership support from money because, we had a project and the cost was $750,000, but they stripped out everything except things that bought stuff. And so then it becomes, borrowing from Peter to pay Paul to do the security, the integration, the design. And so, that's my world, and I'm not sure that's money or leadership support, but it's both.
What I would say is my head, one of the aspects of leadership support is it helps with prioritization.
Yeah.
Is they help to guide where that money goes, but you're right, if they had more money, maybe the priorities they chose would have been different.
Right.
It's complex, that's why I chose these, because they're complex.
Yeah.
Paul?
Yeah, I also think leadership support is the most important thing. That would drive, leadership support would drive the money. And the federal guidance, I think, is mostly clear. Leadership support, I think, would distinguish security from other activity, and not view security as a kind of cost center or a thing that hinder performance or other research activity. So I think leadership support is the most important thing.
Okay, and I just realized something. If we would everyone go back and introduce yourselves, and then for the rest of the panelists, please do so.
Okay. So this is Ramazan Aygün. I am at Kennesaw State University. I am an associate professor of computer science and data science, and I am also director for research computing.
I'm Lori Sussman. I am at the University of Southern Maine as an associate professor of technology and cybersecurity.
I'm Phương Cao. I'm a research scientist at NCSA.
I'm Stephen Strang. I'm a research development strategist in the Research and Innovation Office at the University of Minnesota.
Now you have to pick one.
Oh, and go ahead. Money, definitely. Because I sit in the very sort of broadly defined overlap between cybersecurity and research, and some of us in that overlap, get paid to do technology and cybersecurity, and some of us, don't, but we're still intimately involved. And I feel like my leadership anyway understands the importance of cybersecurity, but they also feel like they have a whole lot of other important things on their plate, which, maybe for reasons of, education and, lack of some, crisis, feel like those other things need the money more than, we do.
Okay, Shu Yuan Metcalf, Florida State University. I'm associate professor, but I'm also a Fulbright scholar at University of Bologna, right, this semester. So I flew all the way from Bologna here. I really enjoyed the session. Thank you. I think what is very important for if I need more to improve research cybersecurity, I wouldn't choose any of those, although they are all very important. But for me as a researcher, I think the knowledge generation is very important. And I think we are together facing the future of unknown. And the cybersecurity is totally different from what we experienced and know 10 years ago, a decade, 2 decades ago, totally different. So we need more people, young people. So as you can see that I am very much into education and research. So we need more young mind to really understand the technology, behavior and to really help us understand and solve problems and facing the future of the unknown. So all of those are very, very important, but we need people, we need the knowledge to help us to move us forward. Thank you.
So let me ask you a question. Just if you were about to start an initiative at one of the universities you're associated with, would you rather have leadership support or money to kick off the initiative? If you're thinking about establishing a program on your campus, what do you think would cause it to happen? Some VC or vice chancellor saying go, or a large grant or endowment kicking it off?
Yeah, I think definitely leadership support. I agree with all of them because I think people with a vision can make things happen. Money will come in. And if you have the money and misuse or misspent, then it has produced no result. So leadership support.
Hi, good afternoon. Melissa Cragen. I'm the Associate VP for Research Computing at Rice University. And I'm going to select leadership support also, but it's not only support. We've got commitment from some of the administration. We've certainly got commitment at the university level. I think because we're in this complex moment of emerging regulations, scrambling to do new compliant sorts of services, research, security, advanced cybersecurity, having people understand the roles that need to exist to be able to support all of the research cybersecurity, and to make that happen, be able to plug things together, and just produce an entire environment that's not only technical, and that requires understanding on the part of the leadership to make those things happen.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. So I'm Smriti Bhatt. I'm an assistant professor of cybersecurity at Purdue University. For me, I think money is the most important because funding is really that matters, especially being assistant professor, right? So funding can make your leadership support come in. I feel like that. I agree with everyone else, but that's what my view is. And one of the other challenges during the fellows program also we learned about it, but the other challenge was researchers themselves. They don't want to do additional steps for cybersecurity. We talked about it in our keynote, right? Today we learned about how humans are basically. So even if we have cybersecurity mechanisms, if people are not adopting them, especially researchers, that is a very big challenge. And that's where I feel leadership support comes in, because if you have something coming up from the leadership, the researchers are aligned with that. So I feel that's also very important, and another thing as well, but I think most important is money. Thank you.
I'm Charlie McElroy. I'm an assistant professor at Cleveland State University. I'm very grateful to have been a CI fellow. I would say what I learned from my fellowship and the way I look at the 3 points are, I see a synergy of the 3. So one of the things I did when I was a CI fellow is I was very grateful. I got support to go to a conference for high performance computing. And while I was there, Oracle was there. And I talked to them and I said, well, what do you do with academics? And they said, well, we have a special grant opportunity. We'll give you $50,000 in credits to run research on our platform. And so I had never worked with them before, but they were very gracious. I applied, I got it. And then that was very helpful for my research. And then that sort of helped stimulate some ideas sort of out of the box, not typical what professors do. So over the last 3 years, let's say, last year in particular, what I've been doing with my students and myself in particular is doing crowdsourcing competitions that the DoD and NIST have been, among others. And so this summer, I won 2 of them. One was for DoD and one was for NIST in cybersecurity. So I sort of see it as the synergy of the 3 because there's money involved. They're providing guidance. I mean, there are problems that they haven't been able to solve and they would like to have input on it. And then the leadership support, both in the government or whomever you're working with, wherever your client, is very helpful. And typically there's follow-on funding. They like whatever happened if you win crowdsourcing, then that's sort of like a talent identification or opportunities. So I sort of see it as a synergy of 3 that I like to try to do in my cybersecurity research.
Hi, Jerry Perez. The Director for Research Computing and Services at UT Southwestern. I'm also Professor of Information Systems at UT Dallas. At UT Southwestern, I've been asked to lead the Research as a Service project, which is going to provide high performance computing and storage services to all of campus. And so this is a very relevant question. So what I've actually done in practice is I've had to do the research on the federal guidelines, the state laws, and pass that on to my leadership and help them get the big picture of what their ask is about and how much they need to invest in the project itself. And so I think with the guidance, the leadership then has a clear idea of specifically, how much is it going to cost and what our limitations should be with funding the project. And then they have procured the money. And so we're doing a pilot right now. And once we develop the technology and deploy it, then we can talk about making a permanent line to sustain the project into the future. And then tap into grants in the future as well.
David White, research professor at Clemson University, and I'll kind of speak from, I guess, an organizational perspective and then more of a research team perspective. So from a organizational perspective at Clemson, Clemson's has a task force focused on the implementation of CMMC for level 2, hopefully 2025. And I would say that leadership from the research office up to the president's office, provost, they all understand this has to happen. But talking to the folks who have to actually implement it, it's going to be money. Because they're going to do an enclave, and they're talking about Active Directory eventually in that enclave, HPC in that enclave. So the staffing, the people, the infrastructure, you can imagine is going to be a big step. So that's a money perspective. From a research team perspective, I just sat in an organizational meeting for a large NSF infrastructure grant focused on coastal observation. And there's 30 people on this team. It's a mix of academic and private industry. We had this big organizational box identifying where everybody's going to be working, and there was this cyber infrastructure section. I noticed that there was no cybersecurity box in that particular organizational chart, I guess I should say. And so that was my comment to the lead, was that we're missing our cybersecurity box. But then when you kind of start to think about it, what exactly is that going to look like? What does that cybersecurity need to look like? And I would have to say the federal guidance on, what do we need to be doing to lock down coastal observation systems?
Again, I'm the director for the new Institute for Informatics of High Technology at Gonzaga University. Previously, I was at RIT, so previous affiliation was RIT. So my answer is money, because where I'm sitting right now, the leadership, this is one of the top 3 strategic priority for Gonzaga. So leadership support is there. Need money to hire expertise, hire engineers, data scientists, faculty, staff, and space, facilities, equipments. So yes, money.
Yeah, I can't disagree that in the end, money is a resource and it guides you. Like, we could equate so many other resources, people, time, systems, other things to the money that we can spend. And so clearly we can't achieve any of the cybersecurity research, the fundamental research, or the actual compliance or security controls we need to implement without the funding to support it. And then I think we get into this case, like the reason I put on the federal guidance is I worry that we're in the state of having to basically cover a superset that just keeps growing, and there's these edge cases and it just expands. And so, without saying like, look, everyone is just going to do FISMA A or B, A for low, B for medium, and that'll cover, you can just bucket your data into those 2 classes and we'd be good. That's not going to happen. And then we get things like UK Biobank and things where we come in with data use agreements from across the country. So I said federal, but of course it's that. So that's one of my concerns. Of course, if you had our CISO, Winston Armstrong, in the room, I don't know if he would have picked money or leadership support. He probably would have picked money, but it's usually someone else's job to find the money. and it's his job to make sure the work gets done. So I'm going to pose this question to him to see what he says. Thank you, everyone, for responding.
I just want to add one, I bet it's true for everybody who picked money first, that if they would need a little bit less money if we had unified federal guidance.
Exactly. That's the argument I'd like to be able to make to anyone listening in or with the ear of an NSF program officer who can deal with it. And it's not just the NSF. We are in a very strong NSF context here, but NIH, DOE, and DOD are very much driving a lot of this. And I work on some of the identity stuff. And so that's also was on my mind as each of my, that. All right, thank you for that. That went really well. So this will be more open-ended. So question 2, biggest misperception about research cybersecurity. And so you think of this, whatever, it's either what you see every day or other things. And I'm going to say that I've got my answer to this just to give you an idea. One of the biggest misconceptions I see is that it's being handled by the university. That the researchers, when they're presented with like a compliance question or something, they're like, oh, the university systems are good. So even if I'm running this HPC cluster with public IP addresses, I'm okay. And that's a very kind of straw person argument, but you know what I mean. But I think that, that lack of clear definition of what's handled in the kind of shared control space or shared responsibility model that, oh, no, campus does that, so I don't have to worry about it, even if I'm off doing my own thing. So that's an example of a misperception. So anyone else got some that they've run into? Yeah.
I'll go, and this is actually a very personal belief of mine, and it's something that I would like to explore with anybody afterwards and talk about, because I'm trying to figure out how to negotiate this, which is, I feel like the biggest misperception about research cybersecurity is that it's only about compliance and not about protection. Anurag, in his presentations has, that first slide that says, what's the biggest risk to research, which is the research not getting done. And at least, understandably in my university and probably lots of others, the perceived risk to the research not getting done is, penalties from the regulator or just, overly onerous regulations getting in the way. But, ransomware stops research from getting done. Not being able to access any of your equipment stops research from getting done. We don't, I would like to find a way to change the conversation more from compliance to protection.
So instead of, we're only doing it because we have to,
Right.
Like we're being told to, we're doing it because we know it's the right thing to do to ensure that our research gets completed. That, and of course, many of us that were working in cyber infrastructure before compliance became a buzzword, were doing cybersecurity because I remember being in the lab in grad school and we're working on one of the machines at SDSC and angry cheese struck and basically, all of our terminals suddenly had ASCII art of cheese telling us that the system had been compromised because an administrative password had been taken. It was like, clearly that was an issue. It was also, we immediately clipped that and it got printed up and put out around our lab. So anyone else? Misperceptions? Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the big misperceptions is that people think that the vendors are going to take care of the system as well as we, like whoever put it together, IT or the university. And that's not always true. They're only loyal as long as the warranty is being paid. They're only loyal as long as the product is still viable. And so where does that leave your data and your research? So don't ever think, oh, well, we purchased all the support from X, Y, and Z vendor. They really don't have your best interests in mind. So it's a huge misperception. And so we have to have plans in place and to prepare for the inevitability that there will be a separation in the future between us and our vendors.
You will often select different vendors at different time. And of course, you make me think about the open source space that I'm active in. And, the project that I work on, we try to do our best, but then again, we literally have this is provided without warranty statement And then I think about the changes with CentOS. For those of you not deeply immersed in the Linux environment, when one of our commonly used Linux distributions to operate our systems suddenly went away, and now you get this change where people are reproducing it and stuff like that. It's like, how do you now, you've got to be prepared for like kind of seismic changes to your systems. And if a vendor, even a commercial one, goes out of business, gets bought, starts to bundle their products like the Bright Cluster Manager from NVIDIA and stuff like that, these all impact you in different ways. So others.
I think the biggest misperception is that the research faculty have a clue about the cybersecurity ecosystem. First of all, there's a very centric discussion that's at the R1 HPC, level. But most universities are R2s and community colleges. And when we've got to do research, and I'm dealing with, multidisciplinary stakeholders. And I talk about cybersecurity of data and password protection. I could be, they look at me like like I'm a unicorn. I mean, so sometimes we think that our users are as savvy as we are, and that's a huge misperception. Or that they're getting trained, which is another huge misperception.
And I would say also the question that is important is, when should the researchers have to know about this? Because whenever you take somebody who's trying to do something that they're really good at, math, biology, agriculture, whatever it is, social studies, things like that, it's like, how much do you want to add to their burden of knowledge that they have to become experts in this as well? Like, that's why we have fund managers and pre-proposal support and stuff like that. It's like, they'll walk you through it.
So at R1s, you have fund managers.
Okay, fair.
That's my point. When you're at an R2, what happens is you land a whale of a grant, and then they go, oh, by the way, did you talk to this person and that person? And have you, what are you doing for your security of data? And like, whoa, I didn't even know there was a department for that.
My privilege just got exposed. Anyone else? Misperceptions, things that you keep coming across, like, yeah.
I do open science, so I don't have to worry about that.
Funny enough. Yeah, like just because the data is open and it's all public and stuff like that, like no one's gonna touch my system. Yeah.
20-year-old box with public, no keys and, yeah.
Yeah, the telnet access I got to a plasma physics lab as an undergrad, like he was given to me, but yeah. So anyone else? Yeah.
Maybe when we talk about research cybersecurity, the goal maybe is assume that the research will be 100% secure, nothing bad will happen, the data will not be hacked, and so on. I think that's a misconception. I think the main goal is due diligence to make sure that we have implemented controls that we can do to the best of our knowledge or what best on our capabilities. And if something happens, we have a, knows how to deal with it. So build that risk management framework and, and then do it. I think there's a misconception over there. I believe. I think people think that when research is secure, nothing bad will happen, but it's possible. I think that's a misconception.
You implement the controls hoping to reduce the likelihood, but risk management is about what do you do if. Like I remember asking your kids, like, what would you do if? And the tabletop exercises, I think, that have been run are critical. It's like, yes, it could happen to you, and it's why we have AED training, right? In our labs, it's like we know what to do if somebody's having something happen. Having them prepare for, yes, you had ransomware. And being able to say, it's open science, I can go get more data, just don't pay them, is a wonderful thing to know, but you need to decide that beforehand, or you should decide it beforehand. All right, anyone else for this one? Yeah, well.
Yes, so not the misconception, but I think most people believe that security is a overhead to the research productivity. So I like to think in the other way, how do we make the security an accelerator for research productivity or rolling out features. In many of the cases, working with complex system, I've seen people, they worry making the changes to the system or making changes to the code because they worry that it would cause a security issue. So if we approach research security from secure by construction, for example, providing the user with the tool so that they are confident that whatever they do, there would be a mathematical proof, for example, to guarantee that it is compliant and correct by with regard to some specification. That would bring in the confidence and more trust into the research cybersecurity in practice.
Well, I think you've got a really good point. I'll use the example of science gateways or portals that are created to enable science. Those are, in many cases, web services, web applications, and things that interact with other services. And, you know, they can be tricky because they will then call out to other services. And if they're exploited, they have access potentially to all their users' data in their systems. But if there are ways to provide low friction guardrails to increase the confidence level that the code or application that's being deployed to a science gateway, like I fundamentally believe as a CTO that programmatic access to our resources is critical for the ongoing usage of our cyber infrastructure. But that programmatic access means programs and codes. And so having the way to assess and look at the code in a way that doesn't put more barriers in the researcher implementer's way would be critical. Because I do believe at the moment, it's a perception of mine that it's hard to do that. And I would like to change that so it's easier. All right, thank you everyone for that. We've got a few more questions and we're doing great on time because we can always stop right at 5 o'clock. So, all right, let's try the next one. How do you, when you're doing something in research cybersecurity, how do you know when you're making progress? And I've defined progress as reducing risk and assuring mission success, right? This is, how do you know when there's something that you've changed or created or added to your activities that actually makes the systems more secure, your users more secure, the data more protected? Is it not getting called in the middle of the night? Is it people stop complaining about having to reset their password? Things like that.
Well, in a perfect world, our users are doing what we asked them to do. And so they're reading the documentation, they're reading, especially if they're starting a new application. Like for example, there's now machine learning, LLM models, some novel computing that's taking place. And so there's documentation that's created for that. Are they really studying the documentation and following through? That's when we know we're successful because we don't get called at 2 a.m. We know that our documentation is strong, it's verbose, and our customers are satisfied. So in a way, we have to work really hard at the front of the envelope to prepare them to do their work. And then once documentation can match the satisfaction, then we're successful.
So let me see if I can say that in a different way, because I do believe, and this is meant as a little bit snarky, that any security plan that requires relies on users consistently reading documentation is going to have issues. But having your documentation and support for your users presented and designed in a way that they can find what they need at the right time is fantastic. So, it's like giving them just what they need, like just-in-time delivery. And then I bet if you're on a campus that does like user satisfaction surveys and stuff like that, the fact that you're not getting user support tickets and you're not getting complaints is a reasonable metric, because it means that you've guided user behavior. Don't make me think, no decision fatigue, et cetera. So yeah, I think that's a good one. All right. Sorry, at the end.
I think that the mindset shift will be a good way to measure. How you measure it, I'm not quite sure. But mindset shift, I think earlier this morning about the usability, right? the before and after two-factor authentication, before and after, the mindset shift, that, like you said about guiding the user in a different way. I personally would not buy the documentation side, but I like that, how if we can measure the mindset shift.
That's a really good point. And you can, and this is where I think, you know, multidisciplinary teams and stuff like that. I've been on projects that have engaged sociology and psychology researchers. Finding out, you know, how do people's perception of this, you know, how do they vary over time? Because you're absolutely right about 2FA. And I think other security and compliance things will fall under it. But it'd be very interesting to have a campus that tried to engage a researcher to measure that as they were implementing various programs. Like UCSD now has a new CISO at the campus level, and there's a new program. And I know that there'll be some analytics, but I don't know if perception and feeling and et cetera are part of that, or if it's more what got implemented, who's actually using it and stuff like that, much more on the adoption level, not at the, yeah, I adopted it, but I'm still angry level. Or I adopted it and that was not a big deal. Like I'm no longer as angry about Duo as I used to be. Yes.
Yeah, I think, how do we know if we're making progress? I think it's very difficult if we are running an operation. And I think in that aspect, thinking about setting a benchmark, you know, from whenever you would like to determine, you know, you have a baseline, you set your benchmark, and security or the success can be measured in multiple different domains. There are institutional measures, there are environmental measures, there are also in the human behavior measures by the help desk ticket, right? And there are also some of the very objective things you can obtain from syslogs. So those different measures, if we set the benchmark and a year later, 5 years, then you can see, you know, the success. I think it could be, you know, it's not like a research project. I run my research project, but I think in a institution, you know, you have that measured, that really helps to see security. The best security is very transparent. The best security is when nothing happens. Everybody is so happy. And but you got to have some benchmark to see that everyone is happy.
I think it goes back to the discussion about privacy in the keynote, you know, if you've, you know, you can have all the greatest technology in the world, protection technology, but if it's not coupled with good training, and you know you're making progress when you have a community that has this culture of cyber security. So it's really creating a culture.
Yeah, I do think that the attitudes within the organization and the attitudes, not just of like specific user, like about specific controls, but in general that yes, everyone understands that we have to do this and we're doing it in a way that's intended to be as transparent and as low friction as possible, but they accept it as not burdensome because we've done it in a way that they don't find it to be too onerous. And I think that is very much a challenge. And, you know, a lot of organizations, of course, the classic security is off to the side as a separate group that's not engaged. I do think, you know, like when you mentioned on the proposal, ensuring that those folks were embedded from day one and they were conversations and they were part of the team. You know, I was at a program this summer and I asked like, you know, with AI, do I have to keep, everyone has to learn math, physics, you know, AI and computer programming. It's like what, you know, after 30 years of grad school, they can finally be a researcher. And the panelists gave a great response, which is no, you just have to accept working in multidisciplinary teams. So the specialists, some of their skill set has to go to the interaction. And I think security is another example of that. When you think of operations and leadership, it's you have to now think about how do these people coordinate across each other to ensure that they're serving the entire organization and not just their silo. So,
I want to say something provocative.
yes, that was the idea.
I think that the risk reduction or risk assessment paradigm is broken. And part of the reason why it's broken is because it's so difficult or virtually impossible to come up with a baseline in order to establish whether or not you're making progress. I'll give one example. I was asked to consult with one of the big four cloud computing groups, and they told me, and some of this is in the public forum, they said, we've been compromised. Our keys, our fundamental keys have been compromised, and we've been compromised so badly, we cannot assess the compromise. So we do not know. They have the keys. We don't know if they've been able to replicate them. We assume they have. We assume we're still compromised, but we cannot give you an assessment because we cannot establish a baseline of whether or not they're on or off our system. So I would say that it's a very humbling process being in cybersecurity. But I think part of the problem is that our paradigms of how we do this are broken, and we need new ones to help see a new way.
And the reducing risk one, of course, assumes that the threat is constant. Or, otherwise you just have to scaling your activities based on the escalating risk or the escalating threat. And so far as we can tell, the threats are constantly increasing. The people that are coming at us are at least as smart as us, potentially better funded. Some of them aren't. They have leadership support, et cetera. So thank you. Okay, let's doing great. We've got a few more, and I think I wanted to get this one up there, which is, okay, forgetting the folks in Trusted CI, who else do you know of that you would like to share that you feel is doing research cybersecurity right? And basically it's like, I said, like, who do you want to cheat off of or copy from? But basically, like, who would you love to get some ideas from and inspiration? And I remember years ago when Stanford had a new CISO, and he had a very active campaign of providing simple handouts to researchers describing various tiers of activities and basic things to do. I was like, that's an excellent move as a way to communicate to a campus. Of course, you're a private university and you've got all that money and leadership support, so you can do it. But I do feel there are times when somebody is doing something exemplar and, we can plagiarism and flattery, however you want to say it. So who else besides Trusted CI do you see up there that you think is doing the right thing and could be an exemplar inspiration, or maybe somebody that we need to talk to and learn from?
Well, let's go back to the first question, right? About governance, the government guidance. I always look towards NIST. And even though I hear nothing but complaints about the grocery list that they have that you got to follow in order to harden your system, it's that way for a reason. Because if you can honestly answer all these questions and know where everything is, your system is hardened. It's very solid. So I would say NIST would be my answer. I would cheat off their notes any day of the week.
They do, and they do try to do stuff in a way that gets community engagement, and then they do, I believe, eat their own dog food and live up to their own standards. So, and I should also say, in the public or in the commercial space, this may not be limited to other academic or research organizations. If you can think of a commercial company or other external group, like, I'd love to see somebody that's really good with like GitHub and pull requests and CI/CD for evaluating code in open source before it goes into deployment and things like that. So anyone else? Yes.
Oh, okay. So, whose notes do I want to copy from? Currently, I am associated with the University of Bologna.
Yeah.
And so I'm on their faculty list. And I feel that, that university is very sustainable and they run for a very, very long time. When I interact with their security folks like human resource and the IT department, because I need to be enrolled into their systems and also interact with the faculty and other people. And I feel that they don't have a situation to make me feel like they're burned out, so that they are very relaxed. It's not like I am afraid that we put in so much work for our operations that people running the operations, they're so burned out. It's so much work. Is that very sustainable, right? And I think there's something that we need to probably think about, which is how would other like that university, what's their value? And how would they convey the value to people? So I think their campus is also is under, of course, a significant transformation. I think we are all under, the campus is growing, it's transforming constantly, it's never constant, it's constantly changing. But how do they change that? And when I talk to their IT people, they work 4 hours in the morning, 3 hours, they come back to work, and I was like, very urgently need to get certain response. They come back to work at 2, they sign off at 5, they don't respond any other time. They're very, very relaxed. And yet I feel like their system is very secure because, you know, as I also interact here, so I find that they have very good practice. But how did they implement that, which is not just the IT staff, but also faculty and other people? And they're very, very relaxed about it.
That's a very interesting point. Yes, the work-life balance and cultural aspects of Europe, they run, you know, you have CERN, you have the Large Hadron Collider, you have supercomputing within Switzerland, and I've had collaborators from Bologna. And so I'd be very interested to know, like, we sit here in a very US, mostly NSF bubble, but like the organizational structures, like they, I have no doubt, are facing a similar level of attacks. And I know that there's been European initiatives to do stuff like they'll do funding to improve security and open source. So they're very they came up with GDPR, things like that, which puts new burdens on things. So I would be very curious, like looking, and there must be studies on this, comparing public United States universities to European ones, and what does the typical balance, like, do they have additional staff, or have they found a way to be more efficient in their operations? Are they not having to meet the same level of expectations? Like, how are they achieving this without just becoming like ransomware every other day? Because we're not seeing I don't think we see a significant number of press releases out of Europe compared to the US per capita or per university. So it makes you wonder, are they not as hot of a target? I doubt that. They deal with financial systems and engineering and medical systems, and they've got researchers in all the same fields we do. You know, is it they just don't stress as much as we do? I don't know. I've worked with a lot of Europeans. They stress just as much as we do in different ways. So very interesting point. All right. Who else has a personal crib sheet going? Yep.
I'll give a shout out to the Secure My Research program in Indiana.
Fair enough. I think even though they're close, I will absolutely say that they're on my list to talk to.
And you don't need to copy their notes because they published a white paper about it all. So.
And mine personally, because of the latest dbGaP HIPAA one, is I think I want to copy off Tom Cheatham from Utah's notes, because he's got a cluster that does HIPAA. And he got NIH funding to help build that. And, you know, I think a lot of public universities especially are facing that, is like, how do you do more secure HPC computing? And so Indiana and Utah are two of the ones that I'm interested in. I am not sure if that was my last, so I don't take a moment. So anyone on Zoom or anyone in the audience, we're coming down to about the last 5 minutes. We don't have to go all the way to 5 o'clock. So is there anything else that you would like to know from the panelists while they're sitting up here? Fair enough. Oh, Jim, right as I was about to
say, Charles, are you able to share more about this cloud provider that had their authentication infrastructure compromised? Were they large? Were they a big one? Okay.
Yes, they are. Part of this is that, well, it's in the public domain, that Microsoft's cloud was compromised.
Yeah.
And they lost their keys. And in some ways, they lost the keys. They weren't really practicing like zero trust. And so when they lost those keys, they have no idea. And But you have like 25, at least 25 federal agencies that are relying on that. And they have a pretty good assumption of what it was and what they were going after. So that's, and like the ISPs are compromised. And I think to a large extent, they don't know how compromised they are. They can't tell how compromised they are. So I would say those are the things that sort of keep me up at night. Because let's say our regimen for trying to understand it, I think is broken. So I think we need a new paradigm to try to understand it and try to deal with it more effectively.
I have a question for the fellow. One of the things that each of our campuses have a lot of faculty working on cybersecurity research. And most of those were never used in operation. Some they do, and we have good examples here. So I think for the fellows program or fellows here, is there a way we can champion and find a way to say, how do we bring the faculty researchers, right? Just theoretical, ideal, theory, whatever, right? Bring that to more practical practice, right? To operation. That connection is great. And also the other side, the other direction is that the CISO area, how that can use the university as a playground to work with faculty members. I know it's difficult, people are not sharing data, right? But a lot of people, faculty would enjoy if they can access data or access to certain parts of the network. So I think that bidirectionally to bring closer between the researchers and operational, I think that would be great. And I think this is a great forum for that purpose.
So I have a response that's a very UCSD specific response because UCSD has, I think, a fairly strong interdisciplinary nature to it, that faculty are encouraged and rewarded when they sort of work outside their bubble. And the HDSI, the Data Science Institute that SDSC is now a sibling organization with under the new School of Computing, Information, and Data Science. As part of that school's establishment, they focused on the concept of translational research and translational faculty. It's a term from medicine, right? How do you go from fundamental research to, clinical science, or what you're saying is operational ones? And we've had examples like Casey Claffey and Stefan Savage at UCSD working together using campus network measurements with the idea that some of that will trickle in. I think it's a cultural thing on our campus that makes it more likely. It doesn't mean it happens as much as we want, but it's the encouragement and the rewarding of faculty for doing it. And specifically like HDSI, undergraduate students are required to do a two-quarter capstone project with a mentor, and those mentors often come from other departments. So I would go with the cultural route, like you said, in the shift change. How do you incentivize faculty for engaging in this type of translational work, but make it selfish so the university itself benefits first before others do?
I think the fellows program could have that element, that perspective in there.
Yeah, so Trusted CI found a way to make it, especially maybe for junior faculty, for them to be recognized for their engagement in a way to actually test and evaluate, find students, other things, perhaps. Excellent. All right. With that, we are 1 minute past. Thank you all. It's been a wonderful year to be with you. We're going to see you for the rest of the summit. And thank you to everyone that was on Zoom.